At this time, let's go ahead and begin our webinar, What Does It Take for Large Companies to Succeed in Inclusive Business? I would like to go ahead and hand today's presentation over to Tatiana Basarabova with Business Call to Action. Tatiana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jessica, and welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I just wanted to quickly tell you a little bit about one of the co-organizers of today's webinar, the Business Call to Action. The Business Call to Action is a global membership platform which encourages private sector companies to develop innovative business models that combine profitability with development impact. BCT is supported and endorsed by the multiple development partners such as the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Swedish International Development Corporation Agency, UK Department for International Development, US Agency for International Development, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Government of Finland, and the United Nations Development Program, which hosts the Secretariat. BCTA also collaborates with leading development institutions such as the United Nations Development Global Compact, Inter-American Development Bank's Opportunities for the Majority Initiative, and the World Bank's Group's International Finance Corporation. So far, we have 111 companies that have responded to the Business Call to Action, but making commitments to improve the lives and livelihoods of millions through commercially viable business ventures that engage low-income people as consumers, producers, suppliers, distributors of goods and services. We provide a lot more information, a lot more description of the services of the Business Call to Action on our website at www.businesscalltoaction.org, and you can follow us on Twitter at BCT Initiative. And we really hope to see you at our future events and engagements in the future. With this, I would like to hand this over to Caroline Ashley from the Practitioner Hub for Inclusive Business. Caroline?
Thank you very much, Tatiana, and a very warm welcome to everybody. Delighted to have you here. I will be very brief. The Practitioner Hub is an online platform that's all about inclusive business implementation. Our information and good practice includes resources and information on who's doing what. And our key focus is insight based on implementation, and that's why I think today's webinar is so invaluable, because we'll be hearing from speakers that have been really struggling with issues on the ground and are going to share our learning with us. So thank you to our speakers, and with that I'll hand over to Tom, who's moderating the discussion.
Thanks very much, Caroline. Yes, I'm your moderator today. I'm down on your slide as the Technical Director of the Business Innovation Facility, which is something that I spend a lot of time on, but I'm also helping out at the moment as the guest editor of the Practitioner Hub, as well as doing some other pieces of work. Just a few brief comments about myself. I've been working in the area of where companies and development sort of intersect for most of my career. I recently captured some of my hard-won experience in a blog which you might want to look at on the Practitioner Hub. It's called, I called it Navigating Large Companies. And you might also notice that I'm a bit of a budding artist, so please, if you don't want to read my text, at least go and look at my pictures on that particular blog. Without further ado, let me introduce our speakers today. The first person you're going to hear from is Erik Simanis, who is Head of Frontier Markets at the Center for Sustainable Global Enterprise at Cornell. Erik also writes for The Guardian in their Sustainable Business section, and he's a core faculty member of the Entrepreneurship Lab. And if you want to know more about the Entrepreneurship Lab, then please, again, look at one of our blogs by Milan Simanis on this very, very intriguing and exciting model that Erik is part of. Our second speaker is going to be Charlie Hough, who is Vice President and Head of Corporate Responsibility and Strategy, and Stakeholder Engagement at Novartis International. Obviously, Novartis is a global leader in healthcare, and they have pioneered some really exciting models for reaching out beyond their normal business, and we'll hear about more of that from Charlie in due course. Our third speaker is going to be Eduardo Ferreira, who's Head of Inclusive Business at Itaú Unibanco, which is Latin America's largest private bank. And once again, we're going to hear about some really interesting work that the bank is doing and get an inside track on how that particular company is making progress in this area. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to hear from all of our three speakers first, and then I'm going to host a discussion with our three speakers, at which point you should be able to hear some more in-depth insights from their experience. And I hope that will prompt you to want to ask them questions. So at that point, please do type in your questions on the Q&A panel, and I will then try to get them to answer as many questions as I can towards the end of the session. So let me just hand over to Erik, who is going to tell you about some of his work. Again, hard-earned learnings from the field.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you very much to Tiana and Caroline for hosting this, and Charlie and Eduardo, it's a pleasure to be here with you. As Tom was saying, you did a great little segue there, hard-earned learnings from the field. What I'm going to just share out really briefly are some insights from, it's been more than, I guess, about 15 years of working in this space, and I've been leading work for companies across product categories, across sectors, and doing work from straight up from the consumer insights all the way out through piloting and looking at going to scale with venture. So everything I'll share with you is not because of some tremendous foresight, sadly, but actually just because I literally screwed stuff up in the field and really just had to adjust and figure out how to make these things fly. So with that, let me just give you a real thumbnail sketch of three kind of big challenges and learnings that I've gained over the past 15 years. So this first one is really at a strategy level, and that is, first and foremost, if you want to make these things really fly within a company, and if you want to get them to scale, they've got to migrate and be embedded in the core operations of the company. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this. But if it's not in the P&L side of the company, it's going to be extremely difficult, one, to get the cultural support, to get the organizational rigor behind it, and then ultimately to get this venture to where it's being resourced and it can scale just on the virtue of its own profitability. And this is a very kind of a high level, again, way of thinking about what does it mean to actually embed these businesses and ventures into core business. And I use a building metaphor, but the first step that has to be taken is really citing a venture in a specific part of the organization whose deliverables, whose value creation targets, whether it's incremental sales, whether it's launching new product categories, whether it's driving brand value, but identifying a department whose value creation deliverables really match up with the value creation potential for the venture. And then the next piece is about blueprinting, and that's about being able to build a business case that shows how your specific venture is going to meet that unit, that department's deliverables, their targets, their KPIs, as or more effectively than any other use of their resources. At the end of the day, it's an opportunity cost game, and you've got to be able to position these ventures against other uses of capital. And lastly, it's about building, and this is about how do you actually how do you run, manage these ventures. And first and foremost, if you're going to maintain and sustain that acceptance by the unit and the company, you've got to manage these ventures with the same rigor that group itself expects. So whatever they need to see, whether it's they want to see the business case demonstrate how you're going to reach 10 million in sales in 3 years, that's what you do. If you got to do basis testing to be able to take the next step in the stage gate, that's what you got to do. But ultimately, you prioritize the business's needs first, and the social piece comes as an externality. The next challenge is really on the consumer adoption side, and I think this is something that so many ventures struggle with, and it's ultimately because we're coming to consumers with functionality that's in many cases just brand new to them. So these consumers are having to figure out and embed a new product routine into their lives, and in my experience, trying to drive adoption by using, this is not a pejorative, but kind of end-of-the-pipe marketing, where you're trying to educate your consumer, you're trying to message to them, tell them why they should be using your product. Eventually, you'll be able to get the volumes, but it'll be at such a high cost that the venture is just not profitable. So instead of looking at it as a backup end-of-the-pipe marketing, it's really about having to embed learning strategies, consumer learning or behavior change strategies into your offering and business model. And then over the past, this has been in particular the focus of my work over the past dozen years, is what I call this market creation mix. And it's literally taking the 4 Ps and restructuring those so that we really embed and drive that behavior change as part of the offering. And I'm not going to go through this in any detail. I'll just single out a couple of things. So for example, on the product side, one of the things that we've been looking and testing out in the field and had some really good success with is taking a very new functionality, bundling it with very established functionality so that from the consumer's perspective, there's not that risk of trying something completely new. You're being able to piggyback on already kind of the goodwill and the established routines that consumers already have with these other products. On the pricing side, using something like a subscription pricing, a monthly membership, where you're able to get consumers to repeatedly use a functionality. So they're getting repeated trials rather than if you're pricing at, which is a typical strategy, you do a tenor introductory discount pricing. That's going to get a consumer to use it one time. And again, with new products, they'll have a very mixed experience simply because it's new. So I'll stop there because we may be able to come back to this a little bit later. And the last thing is really about running the numbers. So this was, again, one of the really challenging learnings that comes from ultimately the unique nature of the business environment up in the BOP, and that is that the business units that that are kind of the front line of the business, the sales office, if you will, a sales branch, they are dealing with incredibly low economies of scale. They have a very small maximum efficient scale they operate at, and they typically end up having a very high fixed labor cost because you're trying to drive the product adoption. You have to have a very high touch with the consumer. And what I've discovered is that the way typically companies run the numbers and make the business case, that they unwittingly make these unrealistic assumptions around 4 key business unit variables, which are art, ET, and health, and I'll give you just a thumbnail sketch of what that means. And so consequently, they go to market with products and price points at margins that will not have a path to profitability. So instead, what I've been advocating and developing is what I call a bottom-up approach to actually running the numbers that works from a single business unit that makes sure that the assumptions of these 4 variables are credible and realistic so that you actually are going into market with a clear path to profitability. And there's 4 variables that I mentioned. Again, we're not to go into any depth, but essentially R stands for the reachable market and B is the customer base. These are 2 variables that really impact on the top line. What's the revenue potential? Reachable market is the area, literally all the consumers in the geographic area that the business can cost effectively reach. Whereas your customer base is the subset of those that you would be selling to at steady state, which is really a function of what is a realistic penetration rate for your product within the time frame of your venture. And then in the cost side, the 2 key drivers are these monthly customer transactions, T, and monthly customer sales load, L. And the number of transactions is literally how many times you have to interface and interact with your customer in the course of a month. Is the product you're selling a monthly? Is it something that you have to be there every 3 days? This really drives significantly the intensity of the sales force. And the other piece that drives that and dictates the sales force size and consequently the rest of the organizational cost structure is what is the sales load that a single salesperson can manage? How many customer transactions can they handle in a month's time? And again, not to go through in depth, but just to show this is the basic framework that I've been using. There's an Acumen MOOC that I've developed in partnership with Acumen that covers this bottom-up modeling approach. But essentially, it starts by this 4-step process where we bound the business unit, determine what is its maximum efficient scale so that we can understand reach as well as the base. And then we build out the whole cost structure for this business unit, which takes into consideration not only operational costs for the unit, but also an allocated portion from a head office that has to oversee all these units. And then also looking at the investment costs. This is more from like an NPV analysis. So looking at what is the working capital costs and what are the minimum investment returns. So by loading all that onto a single business unit, we can then divide essentially that by the number of transactions that you're anticipating and know exactly what price point and margin we have to be at to be profitable. Okay, I will stop there and I look forward to hearing from the other speakers.
Thank you very much, Erik, and we'll definitely come back to as much of that as we can later on in the discussion. But before that, I'd like to invite Charlie to introduce the social businesses that he is involved with.
Okay, so thank you. Thanks, Tom, and thanks, Erik. Well, we can go to the first slide, Jessica. Or the next slide, please. Okay. So as was mentioned, Novartis is a leading healthcare company that focuses on prescription pharmaceuticals, generic pharmaceuticals, and eye care. I'm in our corporate responsibility group, as was mentioned, and in terms of corporate responsibility, we really focus on two areas. One is expanding access to healthcare, and the other is doing business responsibly. And the way this slide shows the way we think about expanding access to healthcare. At the bottom of the pyramid, Novartis has had a long history of philanthropic endeavors through initiatives such as donating medicines for leprosy. We've committed to donate all medicines for leprosy until at least 2020, and that's something that we've had a long-standing role in. Zero-profit initiatives or non-profit initiatives is a little bit more recent. For a little over 10 years, we've provided our malaria treatment, Coartem, at no profit in malaria endemic countries, and typically those treatments are purchased by donors like the Global Fund, and therefore it gets to malaria endemic countries at no cost, essentially. But then more recently, we've pursued these things called social ventures, a little bit further up the income pyramid, and the one that's best known in the company, or outside of the company, I should say, is our social business group, better known as Arogya Parivar in India. Next slide, please. And the way this social business started was that in 2005, the late Professor C.K. Prahlad came and spoke with the Novartis Executive Committee and essentially said what's on the slide here. Don't think of the poor as victims, but rather think of them as a potential new market opportunity. And that's what the company did. In 2006, they decided to start this new inclusive business initiative called Arogya Parivar, or Healthy Family. Arogya Parivar in Hindi means healthy family. Next slide, please. And the business essentially focuses on these 4 different areas, because unlike our traditional business, which primarily focuses on sales and marketing just to doctors and pharmacists, here we had to do additional things. It focuses on awareness, so basic health education, disease awareness, providing that in villages in rural areas of first India. That was the first market that we launched into. Accessibility, just making sure that our products were available through rural distributors, and running health camps to make doctors available. We bring doctors into the cells where we operate in India and other countries. Affordability, as I think was mentioned already by Erik, we couldn't bring all of our products in and have them be viable. So we had to focus on essential medicines that could be affordable. In some cases, we adjusted package sizes so that the affordability issue was there. And then adaptability, we adapted some of our packaging and positioning so that it would work in terms of local language. So this was really a different model than our traditional business model. We focus much more on education in addition to providing affordable treatments. Next slide, please. And the way this essentially works is we have 2-person teams operating in what we call cells. There's the social team and the commercial team. The social representative is essentially running these community meetings to build disease awareness, and then also coordinating health camps where they bring doctors to rural villages, as I mentioned, and people can stand in line and go see the doctor about any concern that they have. And typically we would run certain diagnostics in that health camp. So we might test for blood pressure, we might test for blood sugar, but a person can see the doctor for anything. And then if there's a need for follow-up, the person would receive a referral card where they ideally would see the doctor in that doctor's office, and we can track track these referral cards and how they lead to better health outcomes. And then the commercial team is essentially doing what we would traditionally do in our Novartis model. They're educating doctors on medicines. They're making sure that medicines are supplied in the pharmacies. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, we started in India in 2007, and we're operating in 11 states, 250 cells. The business became profitable after approximately 2 years. And then since then, we've launched in these other markets, Vietnam, Kenya, Indonesia, and they're quite different. Vietnam is essentially a partnership with the government. In India, there's very little involvement with the government. Kenya is somewhat of a mix, and Kenya is more challenging because the rural areas that we're operating in, villages are much further apart than they are in India, so it creates a significant challenge from a logistical standpoint. And then Indonesia is a relatively recent launch where we're operating in four different areas. I think our goal will be to launch in many more countries, but we want to prove that this model can work in different types of markets before we expand more substantially. Next slide. And this is really just a wrap-up. The social impact, we've reached more than 17.5 million people, almost 500,000 of these health education meetings, and almost 1 million people have been diagnosed through these health camps. And as I mentioned, a little less than 2 years, or a little more than 2 years, the business broke even and is delivering a positive profit. So maybe I'll stop there and hand back to Tom.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Just before I hand over to Eduardo, just to note that those of us who are tweeting, please have a look at the hashtag that Lara has put in the chat section and use that so that people can hear about what we're discussing today. Eduardo, can I invite you now to please introduce your company and your initiatives? Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes, just provide some information about Itaú and some information about Brazil. Itaú is the biggest private bank here in Brazil, and we have, a big portfolio of clients. I mean, we are talking about 57 million clients. That is pretty big in Brazil. And with just some information about Brazil, Brazil is a urban country. I mean, 85% of our population live in the cities. So 10 years ago, we decided to run inclusive business initiative. So please, the next slide, please. And we start first with microcredit. So we think about the base of pyramid here in Brazil. We have a big population in our country that live with, really low income. And so we decided to launch a microcredit initiative. So after that, we decided to run another initiative related to gender, to provide solutions for women here in Brazil. And we decided to work with entrepreneurs. And the link between the microcredit and the gender initiative is why we saw that many of our clients, they start to be a little bit bigger, but they need more information. When they talk about microcredit, we are talking more about the relationship model than the product itself. I mean, microcredit is just a name here in Brazil because the better concept is microfinance. So for us, it's not only credit, but credit cards are pretty common here in Brazil, and we launch insurance too. And financial literacy is essential for everything. So what we have here, we use the loan officers as the link of the bank and our clients. We have something really specific because for other segments, the clients come to the bank, but when we talk about microcredit, it's the bank that goes to the client. So we develop a solution that is branchless, paperless. I mean, we decided to do something brand new for this segment. And at the same time, we start to think about retired people too. I mean, because what we think is that in the future, we're going to have, the low-income people. It will be pretty important for the bank. I mean, women will be a really important segment of our society, and people will live more, and especially will live different. I mean, the lifestyle will change a lot in the next future. I mean, so for us, when we talk about inclusive business, we are trying to develop solutions that fit to the needs of those segments that are really, really important to us, because as a big bank, a big retail bank, we need to provide financial solutions for all segments of our society. But when we are talking about those new segments, I mean, we know that we have, you know, just the information, the knowledge that we have nowadays is not enough. So we put a lot of money in research. I mean, we need to understand exactly those segments' needs, and we need to develop something that is really sustainable. I mean, we need to develop solutions that that bring financial return, but also social impact. I mean, so for us, we started that 10 years ago. Now we have a real operation. We're not talking about just individuals that act as entrepreneurs. We have more than 100,000 clients. That is really big for us. I mean, we provide credit for them. We have in dollars maybe $200 million in credit for those entrepreneurs. And I'm talking just about microcredit, and when we're talking about the gender, that we are talking more micro, small, and basically micro and small companies. For now, we provide credit is more than $1 billion for those, and we're talking just about gender. What we discovered during those years is that when we talk about specifically women, they ask not only for credit but also for non-financial products. Women in Brazil, they have less networking than men. They have, you know, very short reference, and they ask for education. So in our package, we offer not only financial products, but we help those entrepreneurs providing those kind of services. I mean, and we face, I mean, many issues during these years. The asymmetry of information is a key issue for us. Another one is the cost of transactions. We work with law officers, so for us, we need to understand exactly how to work with that. And one thing that we learn is the combination of technology and ethnology. I mean, is combine the law officers with some tools that we have developed, like the usage of smartphones, statistics, analytics. So now we have in the field something that is pretty similar, all the traditional, you know, microfinance models, but we have on the backstage a lot of technology. So just to give you an overview what we are doing here in Brazil.
Thank you very much, Eduardo, for that very, very fascinating overview. And definitely want to return to some of the challenges that that you and others have faced in due course. I also want to talk more about the points raised by Erik about core business. But before that, I just want to address one question that's already come in. Somebody has asked whether social business and strategic CSR are the same thing. And I guess what I wanted to do is just place this conversation in the territory of what I would call social business or inclusive business. And I think what we're talking about is where companies have tried to pioneer a new business model which will have social benefits but will also be a good business proposition for them leading on from the work of Prahalad and others, around the fact that many low-income people are indeed your customers for now and your customers for the future. So I think for me, I'd answer that question by placing this in a slightly different place from strategic CSR, but I do know other people might answer that question in a different way. So I think we can now move on to a little bit of a discussion with our panelists, which I will lead before introducing more questions from the rest of the participants. And what I'm keen to do, first of all, is just to return to the big picture for a moment and ask you, Erik, whether you think that progress is being made in general across this area. So I know that you've written, a number of papers in recent years, which are in the form of a kind of survey of why some large companies have attempted this inclusive business model and haven't quite pushed on as they might have hoped. And for example, in your recent paper in the Harvard Business Review, where you did a kind of survey across a number of companies where you've got experience. So perhaps you could just give us a flavor of your impression in terms of this whole area and the sort of state of play, as it were, in terms of progress.
Sure thing. So I guess the way I would describe what I've seen happen over the past 15 years, there's almost been this kind of a division in the space, or ventures have settled out into two kinds of camps. I feel like you see the ones that they present themselves, what's facing out to the public is these are social business ventures or inclusive business. They start very often with a very kind of a big, hairy, audacious goal to solve a social problem. And I feel like those are the ones where we're really seeing a big fall off, simply because those are the ones that have struggled the most, I think, in order to get ventures to actually be profitable. And it gets back to this issue of being embedded in core business. But what you're seeing, though, now a lot of is just business ventures that are being run and driven out of core business that don't actually represent themselves as such, but they're actually serving profitably low-income consumer markets. And we've had, through the Entrepreneur Lab that you mentioned earlier, we just had so many cases of these, from Nitin Sharma at BASF, who we had done a Google Hangout with him a few months ago, and just figured out a way to look at his value chain for BASF, take a product off the shelf that the company was actually selling into higher income markets. It's actually an additive for concrete, into cement, and found ways that he could profitably get this into slum redevelopment projects, and it's a huge money earner. You look at examples like in Barclays, have right now a new venture that's been launched called Path to Prime, which is simply a way to try to figure out how to get people who have poor credit history, who don't have the ability to get credit cards, to actually put them onto a path in order to be able to build that credit history and ultimately be part of a Barclays traditional Barclay card customer. But these are ventures being launched just because there's an opportunity seen to reach a market, to grow the business. Lafarge is another great example where they've got a affordable housing team. They don't have a BOP team. It's affordable housing. They work directly with the business units to launch ventures that meet their targets. So we're seeing a lot of growth in that side of it. But I think the funny thing is those are not being represented as such as social business or inclusive business. They have social impacts. They achieve that. But the logic and how they're being managed and run is as business.
Thanks, Erik. And that's a positive picture. Perhaps you could also just expand a little bit on some of the cases you're aware of that perhaps haven't gone so well, and perhaps why.
Well, I'll turn back to one of the really high-profile ones from the kind of the inception of this space. Hewlett-Packard had the World E-Inclusion project, and the World E-Inclusion again was positioned very highly as solving the digital divide. It was structured as a kind of very broad initiative, and there was a lot of great work in R&D that was happening underneath it, but there was no real anchor in the business, where this is sitting, how this is driving value creation, and then the projects consequently aren't being managed to deliver and meet those targets. what happens when you have a change of leadership? Someone comes in, what used to be supported now, because it was, again, this sounds like a negative term, but kind of a special project of someone in senior leadership. Once leadership changes and it isn't able to make them stand on its own business case inside the business units, it did what we expected it to. It just kind of disappeared. And you know, we see this happen a fair number of times. In my own personal work, you know, I've been leading ventures where we started off with not very clear business case, nor even how this was going to fit into the company. And the ventures themselves, you know, really struggled. You know, SC Johnson, some early work that I did with them in Kenya around the community cleaning services, which was trying to reach slum consumers. You know, we did not go in with the real hard business rigor, and that venture, you know, this is a testament to SC Johnson's just commitment to the space. You know, kept funding this and did their best to, at the end, have a really graceful transition to spin out what was then a kind of a standalone nonprofit. But you know, then when we look over to what the company is doing in Ghana, which was kind of a second attempt to really look at BOP consumers, this was looking at rural villages. You know, this has been run as a business venture. There are clear social goals in mind to have about malaria prevention by getting consumers to use insect repellents, but it's been managed entirely different from the get-go, and so consequently, that project has a much clearer path to profitability.
Great, thanks a lot, Erik. Charlie, if I can just turn to you then. You know, the initiatives that you're involved with are clearly are going very well. But I guess that there might have been some challenges that you've had to overcome along the way, or some wrong turnings even made, perhaps, to get where you are now. Is there anything around that you can share with us?
Yeah,
the inside track.
Sure, happy to do that. Yeah, there were a few challenges. One was just the portfolio that we were offering. Initially, the social business group essentially just took the existing set of medicines that were registered in India, and they might have adjusted package size, but they didn't have the resources or the ability to register new medicines that might be available in a different country where Novartis operates. And what that led to was really a little bit of mismatch in terms of what the needs were in these rural areas. Much more essential medicines, that was the basic need. And so we've adjusted the product portfolio and given the business the ability to register additional essential medicines, so now we're covering much more of the needs. And then the second big issue was organization, and that's been talked about a couple of times. Initially, this social business group was sitting within the corporate strategy team, and very soon, I think there was a realization that didn't make sense for a lot of the reasons that Erik mentioned in his opening, that it really needed to be owned by one of the divisions. But that was also a challenge because the social business includes products from our prescription division, our generic division. It used to include products from our OTC division and our vaccines division before we divested those earlier this year, but that led to a little bit of a confusion around, you know, which division should really own this. Ultimately, it was decided that most of the true growth and the true need would probably come from our generic division. So eventually, it was decided it should sit within the generic division, but still, even though the business is profitable, for several years, there was a negotiation around the marketing budget, how much marketing budget would be allocated to this business, and then the head of the social business would have to go to all those different divisions and make the case that I need this amount of marketing budget for you. So organization has been a challenge. And then also just measuring. I guess the third issue is just measuring this business versus the traditional business. And the fact of the matter is, this business is less profitable. So occasionally when people change, somebody new comes into the finance function, oftentimes this business will get challenged. Should we really be investing here versus in some of the higher margin areas? But there is a commitment of top management that this is seen as a long-term investment. As people move up the income pyramid, hopefully Novartis will see some benefit in the long term. I hand it back to you, Tom. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Charlie. So, Eduardo, can I also ask you a similar question? You talked about how some of the many challenges that you've had to overcome have been helped a lot by the use of technology, which I think is a very fascinating area. But I'm also wondering whether you have, you've had sort of internal challenges along the lines that both Erik and Charlie have described in terms of where to place this in your business and quite where it all fits.
Yeah, I agree with Erik and Charlie. And here, what we have is we have a pretty successful combination. In one hand, we have the opportunity to be very innovative and launch a business model that we had a lot of technology. But in the other hand, since the beginning, we have the senior managers of our organization involved in the project. So in all the committees, they participate, and they gave us, their opinion and their commitment, and this is, for us, was a key factor for our success. I mean, I totally agree that when you talk about inclusive business, for a while, they are not profitable. So we need to understand exactly that we are talking about a long-term decision. It's not easy. We have many issues, but we have, in the other hand, many opportunities. And when we're talking about inclusive business, we use that in marketing. I mean, in endo marketing. So people, our employees are really proud of our initiatives. So when we ask, people from IT or people from marketing or human resource, they are proud that we have those kind of initiatives, and they help us a lot. I mean, and for now, for us, this is business. I mean, all my key indicators are related to business. So now this is a profitable business for us. I mean, it's not the best segment of the bank when we're talking about profitability, but we make money with that. I mean, this is why, we had, but this combination to be a business unit that we can improve, innovation, but we have to be part of the organization as a whole. So, and this is really important. And one other thing, when we started, we asked for help for many other organizations. For example, IFC from the World Bank helped us a lot, and the FOMIN from IDB helped us, and we made a lot of benchmarking to understand exactly what we can do at that time. I mean, so another key factor is to have, more organizations involved in that decision in the development. I mean, so this is not easy. I mean, I'm talking about a history that now has 10 years, but more than 10 years, 12 years. But during this period, we faced many issues. So if we didn't have, the commitment of our senior executives, maybe this initiative could fail. I mean, that's why. So this is really important, in my opinion. On.
Thank you. Sorry, I was trying to reach for my the right button to press. I think that's really interesting. I think both you, Charlie, and you, Eduardo, have described the fact that you've had to put in place, new functionality in order to make these business models actually work for you in these new areas. So, Charlie, I'm thinking about, you described how you have a social team, how you use health educators to do a lot of training, and that all must be additional cost for you. You did say that you are profitable, but isn't that a drag on the business? Isn't that meaning that you're not going to kind of meet your KPIs in terms of what the business expects of you? And does that present you with the difficulties when you're trying to get support to move forward with these models?
Yeah, so definitely I think that's one of the reasons, that's the main reason why this business is less profitable than our standard business, because we're providing that health education piece that we wouldn't provide typically in our standard business. And I didn't mention, as we're targeting people who are earning incomes between $2 and $10 a day in these villages, the people that are running the training and the people that are the sales representatives, they're all hired from the local community. So we're providing, an economic benefit or an income benefit to the local community, and that's very important as well because of trust and credibility. If people in the villages are seeing the health education run by a local person that they know, that certainly helps. But it does add to cost. One of the things that we're exploring now, at least with the health education piece, is working with either government or NGO partners or other groups that might be able to do this more efficiently, the health education piece more efficiently. And then on top of that, from a credibility standpoint, it probably would be better not to have the health education run by Novartis because of potential conflict of interest. I mean, we have very strict standards around, the health educators not talking about any specific product, just talking about specific conditions or diseases or sanitation. But still, probably better if Novartis didn't do that, and that might help improve the profitability.
Thank you. And Eduardo, on a similar topic, I understand that in your model, at least for part of the business, perhaps for the microfinance, you can explain, you introduced loan officers, which is something that your bank probably hadn't been doing before, if I understand it correctly. So, again, is that a cost that the bank really needs to be taking on board, and isn't that undermining the profitability of your business?
Okay, yes, you are right. I mean, we introduced the law officers in our operation, but there are two things that are really important to understand why this initiative is important to us. One is some innovations that we put in our initiative now is part of the core business of the bank. For example, we were the first unit to be a kind of paperless. I mean, we don't ask for documents, we don't ask for papers, we just take pictures of the documents and send to our head office. I mean, this is the first microfinance was the first operation that used that tool. I mean, now this is part of the core business of the bank. So almost all areas use the same facility. Second thing, we were the first area to use smartphones in our operations. So branchless was really important. When we talk about cost here in Brazil, space is really, really expensive. So to have just somebody in the neighborhoods and they do everything was really great for us because, was relative useful at that point. I mean, now when you're talking about our SME operation, the core business, they have almost the same solution. So they go to the streets and have the digital facilities for their clients. So this is really important. I mean, is to be part of the bank. I mean, the other thing is to develop a business model that fits to the strategy of all the organization. For example, when I talk about the use of smartphones or to be branchless and paperless, this thing fits to the strategy of the bank as a whole. In 2014, we had 60% of all our transactions were made by electronic channels. I mean, so the bank is running to the same path of microcredits. I'm saying if we can contribute for the banking in innovation, and if our solution fits to the strategy of the bank, it will be easier. I'm not saying that it will be easy, but it will be easier to receive the commitment of the board in our initiative. So in my opinion, and what we are doing here is really business, and we are trying to fit as much as possible our business model to the core business of the bank. This is really important. I don't know if you understand me.
Yeah, I do. And I think Eduardo, what I'm hearing is that that you're reaching out to new customers, low-income customers beyond your traditional customers, and you're actually using that as a way of driving innovation throughout your business processes and the way that you do business, which is fantastic. So in fact, the inclusive business is actually changing the core business in a very helpful way. Would that be a fair summary?
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you. It's very, very interesting to hear about that. Erik, if I can turn back to you. We heard Charlie talk about Novartis and getting into training and education with a social team. That seems, if I can be slightly naughty, to fly in the face of your advice that you delivered at the beginning, where you were saying that large companies should really just be focusing very much on core business and not getting into these other areas. How would you respond to that?
Well, I see in Charlie's case, that education is really trying to basically drive demand. It's a way to try to activate demand in the consumer by making them aware of these medications, so that you're creating kind of a pull in addition to training the doctor. So from that perspective, I see that just as an attempt to address the issue again of getting consumers who are not used to thinking about this functionality of these products to start to really use them and make them part of their lifestyle. So I don't see anything inconsistent with that. Where I see, though, is, and what I hear Charlie saying, though, and this has been exactly my experience, is that type of an approach just does, it's a big weight on the P&L. It's expensive, it's hard to do, you've got to have it sustained, it's got to be there. So, and this is where I've really been trying to move away from that and find ways that we can embed kind of the real learning into the behavior change, into the 4 Ps, into your business model, into the product, rather than trying to rely on that piece. And there's not like an easy solution. For sure, Charlie's got the added challenge that these are products that there's safety issues. There's a lot of regulation around them, so there's fewer degrees of freedom. But what I really like is the question and the interaction you guys had when you asked him about that. He said, "Yeah, it's expensive. So now we're looking for, are there ways we can basically offload that to someone who can do it more efficiently? Or if you can make the case to somebody, like, look, we've got a business model, we can get these products to them sustainably, profitably, we'll keep doing it, but we need your help in driving this piece of it on the education." And be able to then find, and this is when a public-private partnership makes sense to me. You identify specifically what is your cost for that, what do you need this partner to come in and be able to do for you in order for there actually to be a logic in forming a partnership. And this is a way how you can have some symbiotic engagement across sectors. So I'm not sure if I kind of skirted your question there, Tom, but
No, I think you responded well. But Charlie, perhaps I should let you come in again if you've got any responses to that.
Yeah, no, I think, Tom, or Erik was exactly right. We have done this to drive awareness and to drive demand that ultimately we believe will lead to selling more of our medicine. And this, as was also said, we're trying to figure out, is there a better partner who could do this? And as I mentioned, we have a partnership with the government in Vietnam for them to provide the health education, and we're exploring the same thing in Kenya, both with the government as well as with local NGOs who are already out doing other activities with local villages. So the cost should theoretically be less in that instance.
Yeah. Could I just respond really quickly?
Yes, please do, Erik. Yes.
Yeah, and I think so. This for me has been the challenge that I see. So I was saying, and I agree with Charlie about looking for ways that you can find partners to do this. But this is where like these models end up having trouble on the scaling side. So as soon as you introduce a partnership into your model that is there in order to generate operational profitability, you've got to be able to sustain those partnerships in perpetuity. You've got to be able to find new partners as you go to new geographies. So while it's a necessity in this, it really creates difficulty in driving scale rapidly. It's one thing if you're getting a partner to come in on the front end to subsidize some of the upfront investment costs and the working capital, where it's a one-time presence, we're there, we're gone, you now keep running the model on your own. But here, you've got to make sure that partnership is always in place, because they are there to make sure that the business itself is operationally profitable. So I'm just introducing that as a challenge and why so many of these do then have trouble scaling, and it'll take more time. But again, sometimes that's what you got to do.
Great, thanks a lot. I want to now turn to some questions that we've been asked by our other participants. And one theme is coming through for you, Erik, which is several people asking variations on the same question, which is a lot of the things that you've talked about seem to be very much relevant for consumer-facing companies and markets. To what extent do you think that the same advice would hold true for companies who are seeking to procure from small-scale producers or doing more of a sort of business-to-business type model in this inclusive business area?
Well, on the business-to-business side, I mean, the BASF example that I mentioned from India, that is B2B. I mean, in this case, the person driving the work did fantastic downstream value chain analysis to identify where they could add more value throughout the value chain through their product, and then being really smart in how you went in and selectively targeted how to market and sell that product. So in that case, this was an additive that went into a cement mixture that then was used in slum redevelopment housing, and it basically went to the very end of the person who was doing the redevelopment housing, and was able to demonstrate that, look, by using our additive in the cement that you're using, you're going to be able to reduce the length of your project time by essentially 4 or 5 months. That the time frame that they have to build the housing in really drove their ROI significantly, because they have to provide housing for everyone that's been moved out of the slum while the new housing is being built. So by being able to secure commitment at the end level, he then went back upstream and said, look, add to the person selling the cement and the concrete, say, look, add this additive, and this person down here will buy from you. So that's a way you do it as a B2B company. So looking at it though on the other side on the supply, that's a different logic. That is about it's not on the revenue side, but now we're looking at the cost side of the business. And I still firmly believe that you've got to make the same argument that this is going to be a better use of resources than other in justifying doing work to source from small-scale farmers. Ultimately, again, you're going to be introducing a lot of change into your organization in order to figure out how to source, and there has got to be an economic benefit. You're either being able to source for sure at the same price, if not a better price, or you're getting better quality out of your raw materials that are coming to you. So I think the logic itself applies all around. Charlie? Am I still on here? Okay. Sorry.
Sorry, was there a question for me?
I'm sorry, I meant Tom. I was looking at your picture, Charlie, when I said that.
Okay.
Tom, I'll hand it over to you. It looks like you may be on mute here.
Maybe Tom is stuck.
Okay. Hey, Tom. Sorry. I was trying to figure out if I was doing something wrong on my end here. Hey, Tom, we can hear you now.
Erik, maybe Tom is still having a tough time. Do we want to just take any other of the questions that have been typed in?
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'm looking down in here. Well, you know, this is actually one of these questions up here, and I'm just curious, kind of from the both of you, Eduardo and Charlie. I know you're positioning this, and kind of part of the facing is that this is social impact. But what are the kinds of metrics that you're using? You know, internally, how much are the social metrics important, and what kinds of metrics would, in case they are, what kind of metrics are they?
You want me to start? I'll start it, Charlie.
Yeah.
So for the social business at Novartis, a lot of the metrics that we have been using were on the last slide of my deck. Number of patients that we've reached with trainings, the number of people who have seen a doctor, and then the number of total trainings that we've run. Increasingly, though, we're being asked by external stakeholders to measure actual impact in terms of positive impact on health in the cells where we're operating versus cells where we're not operating, or even impact on income, because theoretically, if people are healthier, they might earn a greater income or have greater earning power. So we're working with an outside group to do that right now in India, to actually measure social impact. And then obviously we're measuring all the traditional financial metrics, sales, profitability, and all the other metrics that you would look at. But social impact, we have historically measured more activity-related metrics. In the future, we want to measure more impact-related metrics.
And just out of curiosity, what purpose do those serve, kind of organizationally? Is it for internal, demonstrating the business case, or more of an external communication?
It's more external, really, and actually within the company, we get challenged occasionally by people saying, hey, we're not really measuring across all of our business social impact. We are measuring health outcome with some of our medicines. Are we improving health? But we're not necessarily measuring social impact. The questions that we get from people outside the company are questions like, you're offering affordable medicines and you're providing health education, but how do you know that people wouldn't be better off spending money on clean water or better nutrition versus spending money on a diabetes product or a hypertension product or a tuberculosis medicine? How can you be sure that you're actually not making them economically worse off than they would be by spending that money on something else? I mean, I think that's a difficult question to ask of us, but we're going to try to answer that.
Eduardo, what about you? What kinds of metrics are you looking at, maybe both internally and externally?
Okay, when we talk about microcredit, what we have is every time that our law officers visit our clients, they get social and financial information from them, and we compare year by year the progress of our customers. I mean, so this is not something that we have a real indicators, but every year we had a study that shows that some of our clients are really increasing their conditions and some of those no. So we analyze and try to figure out which of those need more financial literacy, more help. I mean, this is an internal study that we do every year. And the other metric that usually is the amount that we provide to our clients. I mean, so the total amount and client by client. But in in our opinion, I mean, we don't have a real methodology to understand exactly the social impact that microcredit is doing here in Brazil, because it's pretty difficult. I mean, we can understand the increase in the quality of the life of our customers, but there are many other variables that can influence on that. I mean, the economy. So for us, we follow those indicators, but in our opinion, this is not really easy to understand. What we can say is, yeah, for sure, we had social impact, but you know how much? I mean, this is pretty difficult. I mean, it's not easy to understand. That is, if they increase 30%, is 10% for our help or 20 for the market. I mean, we don't have a real methodology that can separate variable by variable the impact of, you know, each of those.
Yeah, I guess, and this has been, I guess, my own experience too. It's just that it kind of within core business, you've got to look for ways to just find proxy measures that, you know, I think as both of you are saying, once you start to look at these broader social issues, my God, the causality just spills far beyond kind of what your scope of your operations are. And that ultimately, you know, kind of for me, I feel like the business, you know, can play a role in those areas, but, you know, ultimately that the impact and value is through the product. Is getting these products that provide a functionality that they don't have into their hands. And so, you know, social impact, you know, a proxy measure for it is, I think what I hear both of you saying is like, how many customers do we serve? How many people are now using this product? And, you know, how that's impacting on very complex underlying social problems is really difficult to untangle. And sometimes going down that path, you know, actually kind of pulls businesses out of core, and suddenly it feels more like a CSR project.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys. I have to apologize. I lost my internet connection, and I guess no webinar is ever complete without some technical glitch or other. But you very smoothly covered for me and answered, I think, what was an excellent question. And I'd just like to pick out one more question while we still have a few minutes, if that's okay. The question is around at what point a company gets involved in actually changing a wider market. And I think this is something that a lot of people in this area are thinking about right now in terms of how you bring about more widespread change. So perhaps Charlie or Eduardo first. You know, do you think that your initiatives in both healthcare and then also in finance are actually bringing about a wider change in a market? You know, such that then other companies perhaps are copying what you're doing, or you're seeing policies at government level actually changing in response to your initiatives, or any such sort of signs of a much bigger change?
Yeah, in my opinion, this is Eduardo. In my opinion, yes, we are combining not only our what we call first-year initiative is when we have the loss of the control of all operation. Now we have a new model we call second tier. We made partnerships with NGOs, and we provide knowledge and financial products for them. And with that model, we can reach, you know, more parts of Brazil. I mean, and we'll talk about gender. We'll talk about billions of reais and dollars too. I mean, in providing credit for women entrepreneurs. So this is not exactly a small business. I mean, we take more than 10 years trying to develop here a real business model, but I can say that this is part of our, it's almost part of our core business. I mean, we have more to do, but now it's something that has a big impact here in Brazil, I mean.
Thank you. And Charlie, what are your reflections on that question?
Yeah, I think it's definitely helped change the market in the way that the industry is looking at the base of the pyramid. I mean, I think since we started our program in India, we've seen several other companies in the pharmaceutical industry to do something similar with the realization that you can generate profitable business in this lower income segment. So I think it is changing the view of the entire industry, and you see many more companies doing similar things.
Thank you. And Erik, do you think inclusive markets is a meaningful term?
Well, you know, it depends on, you know, where you sit. So if you're sitting in a company, you know, I think, you know, focusing on your business, focusing on doing what it takes to make your business profitable is where your focus should be in the scope of it. Absolutely. I think all of these businesses, you know, you get these things operating and make them profitable where they can, you know, start growing and scaling. They're going to have a lot of, you know, collateral impacts. You know, I mean, Charlie mentioned everything from local employment that's being generated, all the other kind of business activity that crops up around any venture. You know, that's going to be there as well. And all these things also then create a platform for others to use. I mean, you know, I guess the example of the M-Pesa is great for that. I mean, M-Pesa figured out how to make this business model profitable, and that now is a platform for others to use. Similarly, I mean, microfinance is probably, for me, one of the examples of an industry that, one of the few industries, probably that and one other one, that has truly scaled. But it's scaled because it made the numbers. It is a viable investment that competes, you know, effectively with alternative uses of capital. And, you know, the business model has crazy high gross margins, but it has to have those gross margins in order to actually return a profit that's required. But so ultimately that microfinance, so that model now it's a platform that governments can use. It's a platform for really changing a lot of lives. So I think that's the distinction I want to make. I think sometimes going in for companies to solve systemic ecosystems, you're going to end up being really diluted in focus, and you're going to take on a kind of an investment that just doesn't fit inside of a single company.
Great, thank you very much. Now we have about a minute left, and I'd like each of you just to give a 10-second answer to this question, which is the topic about take for large companies to succeed in inclusive business. Eduardo, your 10-second answer.
I'm sorry, I missed you.
So I want a 10-second answer to the question, what does it take for large companies to succeed in inclusive business? Charlie, can you give me a 10-second answer?
Sure, yeah, I think it takes a commitment from top management to experiment, try new approaches. And then, you know, I think as was mentioned, once you figure out an approach that works, the commitment to scale the business and not keep it as a small project, but scale it as part of a division.
Erik?
For me, it's about translating a vision for social impact into a business investment that generates a return that's equal to or better than other uses of a department or specific unit's capital. Got to translate it into something that resonates with the business so that they will take it on and drive it as they would any other.
Thank you. And Eduardo, can you hear me now to give an answer?
Yeah, sure. Now we fixed the technical problem, and in my opinion, companies have to think outside the box. I mean, we have to learn from our new customers, and this is really important. So innovation for me is a complement of the other answers.
That's great. Thank you so much, all three of you. So Erik, Charlie, and Eduardo, I think that was a fascinating conversation. If anyone wants to hear it again, we have a recording available, which we'll put on the Practitioner Hub when you can download that. So thank you, all three of you. Thank you to my colleagues in BCTA and Practitioner Hub, and thank you to everyone for attending today. I hope you enjoyed the webinar.
Thank you very much for everybody.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.